Good evening, everyone. My name is Alicia, author of Reading the Qur'an. Let me explain how it is that I came to write this book. I was first attracted to the Islamic world through the spirituality that effuses from Iranian art house films. Looking for ways to learn about Islam and the Middle East, I enrolled in Arabic at the University of Hong Kong, where I was a postgraduate student researching artificial intelligence and the philosophy of mind. My interest in Islam converges with my interest in the philosophy of religion, examining the ultimate pursuit of human salvation and its social, political, artistic, and literary consequences. I'm drawn to the spirituality of Islam but repulsed by the way women are treated in many Muslim communities. I hope that this book of mine can bring about some small changes, which may in turn bring about more changes, and so on and so forth. After I finished the manuscript for some time, a mutual friend introduced me to Proverse Hong Kong and Dr. Gillian Bakley. They very graciously agreed to publish my book after reading it, and Gillian has been a very helpful editor. Now, to introduce the book itself. Is Islam necessarily against women's rights? Is Islam at odds with liberal ideals? I argue that neither is true through a carefully argued textual discussion of the Qur'an. In my book, I argue against literal interpretations of the Qur'an and put forward a methodology for the interpretation of this key religious text. The gist of my argument is that many of the Muslims who follow doctrines derived from the Qur'an and the Hadiths have not given enough consideration to the issues involved in interpreting these texts. I give textual evidence that Quranic passages were not intended to be perfect guidance suitable for all places and all times, and argue for the importance of independent thinking in following Islam. In the introduction, I explain my motivations for writing the book. Then in chapter 2, I argue that Islam needs a reformation, that we urgently need to fight against regressive trends. Then in chapter 3, I set out the principles for a different reading of the Qur'an. I put forward a methodology for interpreting the Qur'an consisting of 5 principles: uncertainty, non-literality, contextuality, individuality, and rationality. I argue that there are many uncertainties surrounding the exact meaning of many passages in the Qur'an and the Hadiths. So for avoidance of error, people should be given maximum freedom, and we should leave it to Allah to judge them. I contend that religious texts are often allegorical because the subjects discussed are frequently beyond the experience of their readers. We cannot take such passages literally in contemporary life. I stress the historical context of Islamic texts and argue that one should critically and independently review religious texts, not accepting the views of religious scholars or officials blindly. I argue that one should reach a reasonable interpretation of Islam by means of modification and extrapolation to decide which are key tenets and which are age-specific and non-essential. In chapter 4, I review passages in the Qur'an that have to do with the main tenets of Islam and reach liberal interpretations according to the principles given in chapter 3. I argue that the main criterion for being a Muslim should be moral action rather than a confession of faith. In chapter 5, I review passages in the Qur'an that have to do with women, giving interpretations and unnerving passages compatible with feminism and gender equality. I contextualize the Quranic passages about women and argue that we should act in the spirit of improving women's status rather than follow exact but obsolete practices found in the Qur'an. I talk about liberal reform in chapter 6. Then I argue that we should leave judgment to Allah and take for the guidance of our lives those passages in the Qur'an that are the most spiritually exalted. In the last chapter, I talk about the concept of philosophical religion, which refers to the view that philosophy and reason serve as the higher goal, whereas scriptures help lay persons ultimately to transcend religious laws and self-govern using pure reason, that is, God. I argue that if we follow the position of the book, then there would be a rebirth of religion, including Islam. I hope you find this talk interesting and is persuaded to buy my book. Read it and tell me what you think. Thank you.